Welcome to another episode of Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. We've been gone for a while, and yeah, that's right, we're back. Tonight's topic is Haunted Illinois. I am your host, Spooky, and here is your other most awesome host, Raven.
Hey. Yeah, we've been gone for about, 4 months?
About that.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Both you and I had a lot of things that came up that we needed to take care of. With life, work, health, and everything else, and we didn't want to be gone that long, but it's just stuff that needed to be attended to. But hopefully,
it just couldn't be helped.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get back into the swing of things, and we'll start doing some shows again. And I don't know if we'll do like every single week, but we might do every other week just for a little bit until things are situated and stuff. You with your life, and I have stuff going on in mine and stuff. So
right.
But tonight's topic, Haunted Illinois, like we said, that's one of our many recurring themes that we have, where we basically cover, we're trying to cover, like, all the states in the U.S. of, all the haunted locations in, like, each state,
Right, and some of you might recall one of our earlier shows when we discussed Haunted Alton, which is a town here in Illinois, and it's considered the most haunted town in the state, haunted little town. But since we are coming back from a long absence and we are a bit out of sorts, we thought we would do one on Haunted Illinois, kind of a light thing there, which is also happens to be my state.
Well, I don't know any show we do is really a light thing, because we still do a lot of research.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is one of an easier research to do.
Yeah, really.
So that's what you meant by it's light, but it's really not light, because we do a lot of research and looking up and trying to find like what's good to throw in. But we've been doing these haunted states now, I think now for a few years, and I think we both come to realize that we're going to end up doing several shows on each state almost, because there's just too much paranormal or bizarre creature sightings that are occurring in every state, and it's... Right.
There are so many reported areas in each state to choose from that it's impossible to fit it all, in just a few hours.
Oh, you can't. But tonight, basically what we're going to do is we're going to do like a little bit of history on each location, as well as these supposed reports of, the paranormal encounters or activities that people are experiencing and things like that. Because if you kind of know a little bit of the history, I mean, we're not going to go into like a massive detail, but we're going to give a big, a chunk of it anyway, so you can kind of understand why people believe that these places are having these activities or whatnot. But I think I'll probably start off first if you don't mind.
Nope, be my guest.
Okay, well, tonight we're actually going to pick popular ones as well as not so popular ones. So some of these you guys probably already know, and some of them you guys probably don't. But that's just like what we like to do.
I personally like to get the ones that nobody knows about. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, yeah, but, we've been out of the swing stores. But anyway, the first one that I'm going to do is the Original Springs Hotel and Bathhouse. Now, this is located on North Hanover in Oakville. I think that's how you say that town? In Illinois. Yeah. Now, this place is a two-story hotel that was built in 1892 that sits on, I think when I was reading the paperwork on it, it said like 1.5 acres. And it has like a kitchen, a bar, a dining room, 30 plus some rooms. There might be more than that by now because they're always adding on, or, you know, when there's new owners and stuff. Now, the original structure, when I was reading this, was built in 1867 by this man named Rudolph. And how it all came about is, I guess he was kind of like a farmer and a blacksmith or something like that or whatever. But he was, I always couldn't figure out why his tools were getting wrecked and stuff. And there was something wrong with his water, and he went to get it tested. And it ended up finding out that it had like really high in, I think it was like sulfur and magnesium. So he and this other guy, one of his neighbors, his name was Kelly, which was like a farmer next, you know, neighbor farming, which you have a big space between. Sorry, I'm rusty about doing shows. We haven't done it for 4 months, so it'll take us a little bit to get back into our talking groove. But they decided that they were going to make some money off this water, so they decided, like, hey, let's go and build like a mineral bathhouse, because his friend Kelly, he had actually come from Germany, and he had worked and had experiences before in bathhouses over in Europe. So they decided that they could make a little money off of this water, so they created this bathhouse, and it ended up becoming really successful, and it brought like tons of people into this small town. And because of that, the town started to expand, and they started building hotels and saloons and, you know, all that stuff. But over the time, they had to add on to the structure, and they ended up expanding it over the years and added more baths and all of this stuff. And then I guess in like November of 1891, there was like this huge fire, and it ended up burning down the whole building. And during the time, people thought, okay, well, maybe the fire happened because, you know, some lamp exploded. But there's other people who were saying that the reason why the first original place was built down is because they believed that there was other people who were jealous of the success that was going on at this place, or somebody actually had a beef with the owners of the hotel at the time, so they ended up taking coals from the furnace and they placed it all over the wooden floors, which ended up causing fires, and the whole place burned down. So then what happened is, the place that you kind of see nowadays is they rebuilt the hotel and the bathhouse in 1893, and the structure that you see now is the one from 1893. Now, the hotel, from what I was reading, was constantly full. It was thriving up until about the Great Depression in the 1930s, and then it kind of died down. But, you know, they had gangsters coming in here. They had political people, a little wide range of everybody coming through these doors throughout the years, enjoying these healing waters or whatever. And isn't there like multiple other bathhouses in Illinois too? Because I swear we did a show on another bathhouse too, and it was in Olton, wasn't it?
Well, that I believe is the Mineral Springs Hotel. They have a swimming pool in the basement of that place that is fed
right, with that
from a spring.
Yeah, I was just having like a flashback. I'm like, I swear we talked about something like this before. Anyway.
Yeah, but we did talk about that.
They had
yeah,
a bunch of colorful people coming in and through these hotel and a wide variety of people and stuff. And because of the Great Depression, of course, a lot of businesses went downhill and people didn't have money to spend and stuff. And the guy who was running it at the time, his name was Conrad. I guess he got really stressed out. He couldn't handle the fact that the hotel was failing and that they were putting it up for sale and stuff like that. So he ended up committing suicide by drinking poison in the hotel. So that's like one person we know so far that's like Parrish that I found through kind of digging the history. So they had two other employees that were working at the hotel during that time in the 1930s. So they ended up just kind of taking over the hotel management, and it was a guy named Tom Rogers and somebody else named Lois or whatever. Now, over the time, the hotel started to have, they decided how to bring in more people. They started having dances and gatherings to bring in more revenue. They brought in live bands and booze and horseshoes, pits. It's been a while since we've been doing these things. Horseshoes and all that kind of stuff. And it really started bringing people back in. It was bringing business in again. The hotel was becoming live again. And, you know, they would have customers here and there throughout the years. And I'm trying to speed through this. But that's Tom Rogers, I guess, kind of became eccentric in a ways. And people were saying that he started acting weird and everything else, and he would often be seen wandering through the empty hotel halls each night. And then one night they found his body in one of the upstairs rooms. So that's another guy who died. So that's two right there, that I found out that kind of passed in this hotel. Well, the hotel closed its doors when nobody could find like a relative of Tom Rogers to kind of take over the property. So it kind of just sat there for a while. But then there was a couple named Albert and Doris Crown, I believe. They were the ones who ended up purchasing the place, and then they started making changes, and they were updating it here and there with kind of more modern day conveniences. And then in 1990, the hotel was sold again to like another couple named Mary and Don, and I believe that's the people who still own it to this day. And they've been kind of restoring it back to how it used to be. And so over the years, this hotel's had many restorations and constructions and destructions and all that kind of stuff. So that stirs up spirits too, they say.
But, sure does.
The hotel today basically has like full service restaurant. It has a pool. It has your mineral spring spa. It has Wi-Fi. They have plenty of rooms for anybody who's interested in going there to do a little paranormal room investigation and stuff like that. But that's like a quick tidbit of the history. But now I'm going to kind of jump into the supposed hauntings or reports of the things that people have been experiencing while they've been here since, I guess, since the day the hotel opened, really, is what I was reading about. But
yeah,
people have been experiencing it. Goes from guests who are staying there to workers who are a part of the construction stuff, or whatever, or just visitors who are just coming in for like a day spa, or even the staff members who have worked at the hotel over the years have had wide ranges of encounters from what I was reading. Because the staff talk about how they're always hearing like disembodied footsteps roaming the hallways in multiple areas of the hotel, which made me think of that Tom Rogers guys, because they said over the years he was always constantly walking up and down the hallway until he aspired there. They talk about hearing whispers and no one's there, or they hear kids, or they hear faint old-time music, probably from when they used to have like the live bands back in the 1900s, early 1900s and stuff like that. They're hearing that kind of live orchestra type of bands playing, and there's no music, there's no one playing anything. They can't figure out where it's coming from. Objects are constantly being moved. They talk about doors being open and closing on their own. People are talking about seeing like shadows or mist-like entities appear or disappear in front of their eyes, or like standing right in front of you. You're walking down the hallway and all of a sudden this full figure apparition just appears in front of you and then just walks through a wall or disappears.
Wow.
You know what I mean? People talk about having being touched. That happens a lot. Some people have even talked, I think it was this place where people felt like one guy talked about he was pushed on the stairs, or he thought he was being pushed on the stairs. But there's claims of this woman who's constantly been seen since, I think it was like 1940s or 30s when it was starting. But she's dressed in the early attire, where it's like she's got that large hat on that's kind of covering parts of her face. And they see her near the hotel office. They see her either standing or sitting in a chair. They've seen her in the hallways. And guests who are staying in rooms often see her standing at the foot of their bed, which would freak me out. Because when you're sleeping and then you wake up and then there's this apparition. I don't know. That's one of the things I don't
woman in a big hat standing at the end of their bed.
Yeah, but you can't ever see her face. For whatever reason, her face is always covered by the hat. But there's also been people who are outside of the hotel where they're driving by, or there's people who are dropping off supplies, for the restaurant or whatever. They've talked about seeing this woman in white staring out the hotel windows. Because there's this one delivery guy, I happened to read his story online, where he was, he saw this woman up in the second story window, and he had mentioned it to the staff that he had saw this woman, and the staff's like, well, where did you see her? So he pointed out this window, and when they went to go check it out, it turns out that this room was actually a locked storage area near the men's bathrooms, and that there's no women or should be in that area, you know what I mean? But there was also no lady there either when they went in. So they didn't, because how did she get in there? They have to have a personal key, you know, and the guy saw her, and to him it was like she was solid and a real person, you know. And there was also fire, you know, because of the fires I was talking about in there. They talked about that there was deaths that happened there because of the fire. I believe that someone burned up because of one of the, I think there was like a boiler explosion in this hotel as well, and some guy died because of that. Then you have that Tom Rogers who died upstairs. You had I think I read about this guy's name. He was like a reverend. He passed away in the hotel because of illness. And then there's that guy Conrad that I talked about who ended up killing himself. He drank like poison. And then there was another guy. I can't remember. I don't know if he was a hotel staff member or if it was just a random guest. But he ended up committing suicide in one of the bathhouse area as well. So a lot of people are not sure if one of these people who passed away at the hotel throughout the years could be the ones that are, you know, haunting this place, or the people that, you know, people are having these run-ins with the objects being moved or the shadowy figures. They always think that it could be one of these people, but nobody really quite knows for sure. And they don't really know who the lady is in white at all, because I never read about any woman passing away. But there was this woman who used to come there a lot, who said that the water was always healing her. So maybe she just keeps coming back to this place because she loved it when she was alive. So, you know, maybe she's still interacting there and enjoying the place that she found happiness from. It's really hard to say, but I think a lot of it could be residual when you're reading this stuff, because they seem to follow a pattern. Like the things that are walking up and down the hallway, it's like the same path over and over again, you know?
Right.
But then there's the ones where people are being touched, you know, or things are moving. To me, that seems more of like an intelligent type of thing.
Exactly. But you know, a traumatic event does not necessarily have to happen in a place for it to be haunted.
No, yeah.
You know, I mean, like the spirit of the woman, she's probably there because she liked it there. That was probably one of the places that she really liked.
Well, yeah, she did talk. I think her name was Anne or whatever, but she did talk about how the water, when she was there, was the only time anything ever helped her. And sorry, guys, we're a little rusty getting back into this. We've been off for 4 months, so we'll get back into the swing of it as the time goes on. Just a little out of practice, right? But
right.
I found this place extremely interesting, and the fact that there's a lot of the old structure, you know, since the second time they built it, it's still there. And the fact that they had such a wide variety of customers coming in, from gangsters to what have you, and people with illnesses, and then so many bizarre deaths that occurred here. You know, it kind of makes sense why, to me, for me anyway, why people might be experiencing these oddities, you know, with...
Well, if you got gangsters hanging out in a place, you know there's been a few deaths somewhere around there.
Well, they actually enjoyed the place when they ended up having the bar and the live bands and stuff.
Yeah.
And when was the Prohibition again? Wasn't that in the 30s?
It was the 1920s.
20s and 30s. Well, yeah, there you go. So and I guess they ended up stalking the place and staying there for a while, because they'd have a couple of their guys on guard at the place and just kind of ran their business there, from what I was reading, with a little bit of the history. But it's definitely an interesting history. I'm going to put it.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm going to put it in the reference, because it was kind of like bull in a china shop trying to get right through it to get to the haunting parts or whatever. But I'm going to post a reference link that goes far more in detail, because this place actually has a lot of interesting things that occurred in it. And that's kind of like why I wanted to mention it. But the hotel is open for business. You can go there. They do have like reasonable prices. And they have a swimming pool, they got a restaurant, and everything else. And I'm not sure, like, I guess if you could rent a bunch of rooms, they'll let you roam around doing paranormal investigating. But I think I've seen this hotel one time on someone's live YouTube channel, where you know how sometimes people do, like, their own paranormal investigations, and then they kind of stream it live on YouTube. I think I've seen that, but I've seen this place before, because I remember the pool area. And I think they were talking about actually having some kind of contact with a little girl. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But this is definitely one of those places where if you are traveling through Illinois, this is one of the places to hit up for sure.
Nikki wants to know where Oakville is located, and I believe, if I remember right, it's northern Illinois, but isn't it like south of Chicago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not from Illinois.
I think it's somewhere along Interstate 70. I'm not real sure.
It's in Oakville, Okawville, Illinois. And if you just type in North Hanover, or just type in the original Springs Hotel and Bathhouse, it'll pop up right away. But I'm not quite sure. I think it's northern, too, if I remember. Don't shoot me if I'm wrong, though. Bad.
I don't travel to northern Illinois very often. Matter of fact, I haven't been there for years, so I can't remember where it's at. I remember going through it or by it a few times, but that was about it.
Why don't you go ahead and hit the next one?
Okay, Benton, Illinois. Now, this is located in southern Illinois, and it's the old Franklin County Jail. This place is a gem, really. It's 403 Main Street, and it's open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Admission is like $4, and you can also book ghost tours at night by appointment, but you have to have a party of 6 or more. Benton is the county seat of Franklin County, and it has a population of approximately 7,080-something people. And the entire area really is rich in history. And the old Franklin County Jail is home to the Franklin County Tourism Bureau. Now, some of the most notable people from Benton are John Malkovich, the actor, Billy Grammer. He was an old-timey Grand Ole Opry star. Charlie Berger, he was an infamous bootlegger. Offa Neal, who was a third baseman for the New York Giants. A former vice president of NBC, senators, and in the 1960s, Louise Harrison, who was sister of George Harrison of the Beatles, moved in and lived here for many years, as well as Civil War General John Logan, who was also a prosecuting attorney in Benton before the war. Now, the old jail was built in 1909, and it has been completely restored with the exception of the jail cells. This museum has artifacts and displays, dedicated to its famous residents, and the largest display in the entire place is the one dedicated to the gangster/bootlegger Charlie Berger and his mob. Now, you can walk through his cell where he was kept, and inside the cell, apparently he must have lived a little bit, had a few privileges because he had his own phonograph. And there's also...
Did that happen like a lot? A lot of the gangsters got to have their own private...
I think it kind of depended on it because like Al Capone lived like a king in...
Alcatraz or wherever the heck he was.
No, that state penitentiary state in Pennsylvania. Can't remember the name of it.
You're fired. No, it's kidding.
Like I said, and there's also a wicker basket that is similar to the one that his body was placed in after his execution. Now, back during his day, depending on who you ask, Charlie Berger was considered a caring person who made sure that his neighbors had enough coal to keep warm in the winter and plenty of food. But there are others that considered him a cold-blooded killer who murdered 10 men in like a span of 5 years. He was a Russian immigrant who sold newspapers in St. Louis. He was a boxer, and he broke horses in the West. And when Prohibition became law, Berger decided to go into the business of selling illegal booze, and he set up his headquarters. Well, who didn't? He set up his headquarters in southern Illinois.
Yeah, shocker.
Yeah, a big shocker. And of course, being the person he was, he attracted the attention of not only the police, but other gangs. And the main one being the Shelton brothers. Now, the Shelton brothers also ran Alton, Illinois at the time. So what they were doing in Benton is anybody's guess. But maybe it was, like the success of the Berger gang, and they wanted Berger's business for themselves. Or maybe it was because they were just ruthless and never backed down from a gang war. Matter of fact, they were known to go out and start a gang war.
Hey, I'm bored. Let's go start a gang war.
Yeah, I'm bored. Let's go start a gang war.
Yeah.
Um,
It's usually for territory and money anyway. And if somebody else's their moonshine or booze is a little bit more successful than the other guys, of course they're gonna go take them out. You can't have people pissing in your pond. You know what I mean?
I hear you. And mobsters used to do that too. Muscle in on somebody else's business. If they thought that it was profitable.
Right.
Now, but at one time though, the Berger gang and the Sheltons teamed up to fight the KKK. Ku Klux Klan, who was in favor of prohibition, and they were determined to run the bootleggers out of southern Illinois. Now, the problem with that idea is that the KKK members were being killed off left and right, and when one of their bodies showed up, the police would just look the other way and report them as murdered by unknown person or persons. So it's safe to say that the police didn't care for them either. We could almost do an entire show on Charlie Berger.
Oh, I
or
know.
For that.
Well,
or
I think
for that
we do
matter.
have some requests to do mobster shows. I mean, there's so many topics that we're going to end up doing.
Exactly. And, for that matter, we could also do an entire show on the Sheltons.
Yeah, I'm not doing a show on the KKK. I'm just putting my foot down to that one. Sorry.
No, I wouldn't do that one either. But after a while, the Sheltons went back to Alton, and eventually Charlie and some of his gang were captured and held in the jail until their executions. Mm-hmm. Now, they were hanged on the gallows that sat just outside the jail, right there on the jail grounds. And by the way, Charlie Berger also has the distinction of being the last public execution in Illinois. Now, the hauntings. And like I said, this place is a little gem, because the hauntings are reported to be the sound of the cell doors clanging shut, doors opening and closing on their own, voices, the feeling of being touched, objects being moved, and all of this has been reported by both staff and visitors. There have also been reports of lights going on and off at night. These reports were made by people driving by, and this was during a time when, there was no one in the building. Now, the staff does believe that some of the hauntings are Charlie himself, but they also believe there are several spirits in the building because they've heard multiple voices at one time or another, as if several people were having a conversation. And this does make sense because, there were many people executed on those gallows just outside the jail. This was, for the time, this was one of the main execution sites in Illinois.
Yeah. When did they stop using the gallows, though? Do you recall? I know a lot of times when people were doing that, they would not even put the rope a certain amount away, where they would let the people struggle there for a long time. Some people that they really didn't care for. I mean, some of these people who worked in these prisons and stuff, the staff were brutal.
Yeah, they were. And just about any jail, though, I don't care where it was in the country, just about any jail had their own gallows out there. Mm. But it was during Prohibition, though, in Illinois, when they stopped public executions. And, excuse me, that was something that always kind of fascinated me, because they would hold an execution and people would actually, there would be a crowd around. People would actually pack a picnic basket and make a day of it.
Yeah, we've talked about that on other shows, but if you think about it, that goes back for like ever, because you have, Romans, and you had the, all that, so people love to watch death. Oh, yeah,
especially in the Old West. People always gathered around to watch the outlaw be hung, and like in France, when they did beheadings on the guillotine. People would actually stand as close as they could to get sprayed by the blood. So this, that was a morbid crowd.
I was thinking of that one comedian who always smashes like watermelons. I'm like, that's really jacked up, dude.
Gallagher.
Yeah, make sure you bring your, extra class so you can get a bunch of blood. Those people are sick back then, but there are sick people in the world, and there are people who find that stuff entertaining, I don't know why. But it does make
they didn't have
why, it does make sense why this place would have some strange activity in it, or, even because of the deaths that are occurring there, who knows if it's kind of like opening a door and allowing dark things in, because there's some people who believe in that kind of way.
There were a lot
one way or the other, but we're just saying that does occur. Yeah. Some people think that does occur.
From what I read, there were a lot of inmates that went through this jail, and there were a lot of them executed there. So it makes sense.
Think about like how many fights broke out. I mean, were there reports of inmates killing inmates, or?
I didn't find any.
Because I do happen to read that a lot.
And it does happen.
Prisons that we've read about or did on different haunted states and things like that have happened. So it does, and how was the condition in the jail or the prison here? Where they treated poorly and stuff. That could leave residual type of emotions.
This was actually considered one of the more humane jails in Southern Illinois.
Oh well, but.
It wasn't exactly.
How were the other ones like super, super bad? And they're like, well, this one's not as bad, but still bad. I mean, what's the rating
send me
scale,
to Benton. That's a nice jail. I want to go there. But this place is not a prison. I mean, there were a time where condemned people did not get all of these appeals and everything like they do now. They didn't sit in their jail cell for years and years and years. I mean, they were taken out within a short period of time, maybe a couple weeks, a month, and they were hung. And back then, why send them to prison? When they could be hung at the jail.
Yeah. So is this place open to allow people into?
It is.
It is?
It is open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can... go through the jail and everything. And a lot of the activity has been reported during the daytime when there's been visitors. And you can also book ghost tours at night by appointment, but you have to have at least 6 people or more in your party.
Just 6? Why not more? It's weird that you have to.
I don't know.
6. I think, you know what, I'd kind of want to go anyway just because of the history. I like going to, like, older places. I like looking at original structures of things that are built from the 1800s to the 1900s. I like old, small-time town feels. And, walking through these old buildings and stuff, it's almost like they have an energy or a life of their own. And it's not like, okay, yeah, there's intelligent haunting there, but you can almost feel like you're stepping back in time, like you're stepping through into another past dimension.
Well, the director of this place, he is dressed like they were back in the 1920s or whatever, when this place was really at its peak.
Do you think when these people who work at these places, while they're letting people come in and tour it and stuff like that, while they're dressed back in that time period, do you think that could provoke this type of activity to occur in these places? Maybe that's why people are hearing these jail cells claiming.
Well, it's a possibility. It may have something to do with it, and all the spirits in this place actually seem to be friendly. So, I mean, people who dress up in the time period, that probably does stir them up a little bit. And then they had but they kept all the cells the same. They didn't modernize or redo the cells in this place. The cells are original. And this is now a museum, so I really couldn't tell you. And visitors and staff both have reported the activity, and apparently there's a lot of it that goes on during the daytime. I think there was one report of visitors to the museum that were standing in front of one of the cells or almost to the cell, and the door just swung open on its own and then it closed.
Almost like somebody went in or out of it.
Yeah. And it's not too far from me, so this place is definitely going to be on my bucket list.
You have a very long bucket list.
I don't have a bucket list. I don't have a long bucket list, but a lot of the places that I did research, were here in Southern Illinois that I could leave out on a Friday night and come back Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. They're within driving distance for a weekend trip.
That's because you drive like a NASCAR racer. You know what I mean? Floor it. That's how you can get everywhere so fast. But yeah, this one's another cool place. But it's not even just, when we were researching these ones, it's not just this one or this place or the place I just did. There's multiple places within those towns that also have activity. So if you happen to hit up, say like, oh, I want to go see this jail, that's not the only place that's in this town that
actually there's a garage in this town that is also haunted, and what it was a garage where Berger shot the owner or somebody working there, and it's just like right down the street from the jail. So the jail's not the only haunted place in this town.
Exactly. I mean, I guess we could just, if you're hitting each state, we could be like, okay, we'll focus on each town. I mean, that's why we're going to do multiple shows on each state, just because there's just so much to cover in one section. But I think I'm going to skip into the next one because we want to make sure we stay on our time slot of our show, too. We've kind of, unless you have more to say on this one, I don't know.
No, I'm done.
Okay. This next one is in Chicago. It's the Jane Addams Hull House, which is located on 800 South, what's that?
Halstead.
Yeah, Halstead Street in Chicago. Anyway, the picture, there's two pictures. One part, it's like the original structure of what it was first like, and then the one on the right is where they were adding on to it over the years. But this house first became established by a guy, his name was Charles Hull, and his wife. They basically had this 2-story house built in 1856, and they lived there with their 2 children. And Charles was a really successful real estate agent. I don't know if they called him real estate agents back then, but he was really successful in the business of selling real estate and land and everything else. So he had some good money to him. So him and his wife and his 2 children, they lived here for a while. And I think it was like in 1832, Charles' wife became really ill and she passed away in the house. But right before she passed away, she had requested that this Miss Helen Culver, I think it was either their niece or their cousin, I wasn't quite sure because the websites all kind of had their own. One was saying it was this, and one was saying that, so I'm just going to say both. I don't really know which one it was. But she asked if she could come and care for the children and, upkeep the house and stuff before she passed away because the kids were really, really young when she became ill. And Helen, she ended up coming, and she stayed there, and she did, and it was up until I think it was the Civil War. That's when she kind of left to go become a field nurse for a while, and then she returned later on to care for the kids up until their deaths in 1866 and 1874, and they ended up passing away of some weird illnesses too. It didn't really say what illness exactly, but in 1868 is when Charles closed the doors to the Hull House and moved to another area of Chicago, and then he kind of just left the house lay empty for a while. And when I was reading about this history and everything else, this house was actually one of the few houses that actually survived the huge great fire that they had in Chicago in 1871, which didn't that almost like burn down all of Chicago?
It didn't burn down all of Chicago, but it darn near did. I think it was a pretty big part of it, but Chicago wasn't as big back then either.
Well, no, but a lot of people died because of that. So Chicago alone is like it's got tons of paranormal activity throughout the whole area anyway. But
true.
Plus they had gangsters, and I mean, you could go on and on and on about Chicago. But the area, because of the Great Fire and everything else, the area was no longer like a high-to-do area. It soon became like filled with a bunch of immigrants and factories. Poor immigrants who were coming over here. They didn't have money. They were trying to get a job, so they all kind of conjugated into this little area. So the house had tenants around that time, and they would live on the second floor and would often talk about the attic being haunted. And they would actually, when I was reading about stuff, they would take these pitchers of water and leave them directly on the stairs that went from the second floor up to the attic, because I guess there's like some type of belief that they had, some of the Irish and whoever those who were coming over believed that spirits couldn't cross over any type of water. So they would leave these pitchers of water all over the stairs so that whatever was roaming around upstairs in this house in the attic couldn't come down into their areas of where they were sleeping. And I thought, well, that was really interesting, because this is occurring early off in the 1870s. So they were already talking about this place being haunted. And a lot of them thought that it was possibly Miss Hull herself, because she did pass away in the house. But I just thought that was kind of interesting, so I threw it in before we do the haunting talks. But in 1880...
That is interesting.
I did too, because the fact that they're leaving water, trying to trap this thing up, they're not allowed down there. But in 1889, Charles Hull passed away, and in his will, he left his estate and money to Miss Culver, which, according to some of the websites I was reading, was like way up in the millions, like a couple millions, which is a lot for back then. Would probably go up to almost $500 million here, you know. But because of him doing that, it caused like this huge strife and like this little war between his siblings, you know, his brothers and whatnot, and of course the other nephews and nieces. They all thought that they deserved a chunk of this guy's money, so they took her to court, but she ended up winning. You know, Helen ended up winning the case, and so she kept the house and all the money and everything else. But what she ended up doing was, she didn't live there, but she ended up letting the house be used by several different people. Like at one point I was reading where she let the Little Sisters of the Poor use the area to help kind of care for the elderly. And because, you know, it'd be like an old folks home, you had people who passed away because of old age or illnesses during that time. And then later on, I was reading, after they moved on and went somewhere else, the place ended up being used as a store at one point, a storage room, and then of course, you know, office space for some of the factories nearby. But it was later on in the I think it was like later 1800s or whatever it was, is when Jane Addams and her friend Ellen Starr came across this place, and they decided that they wanted to use this. So they got in contact with Miss Culver, and she allowed them to have the house rent-free for 25 years. And what they ended up doing is they opened this place up to help aid, you know, like the low-income immigrants and, you know, the poor. And they would feed the poor, they would house the poor, they would clothe the poor. You know, even if they weren't all staying there, they would come through there, you know, like the shelters they have now for homeless people and everything else. Yeah. You know, where they're feeding them and everything else and trying to get them schooling or all this kind of stuff. So over the years, they ended up adding on to this house, and they, you know, what they did was they were buying the buildings and stuff around this one structure, and they ended up expanding. I think it was somewhere around like 13 buildings and whatnot. And of course, a bunch of people already know probably who Jane Addams is, because you hear about it at some point when you're in school. If not, you can read about it. I think she even got like some high award. I don't know. I don't want to say like Nobel Peace Prize. I don't remember what she got, but she really helped push this type of what do you call these houses? I guess not settlement.
Poorhouse.
What? Poorhouses?
Poorhouse.
It sounds like you're saying home.
Some places are known as poorhouses. Other places are known as alms.
Yeah, I thought you were swearing there for a second. I'm like, what? No, but yeah, she ended up doing a lot for this and getting it out there, and ended up spreading all over the place. But she ended up passing away, I think in like 1935, but the place was still being used for the same reasons all the way up until like the 1960s. And but during that time, as it got up into the 60s, of course, then Chicago's like, well, we want to use this and we want to use this, so they ended up tearing down a lot of the old buildings. But they actually left the original structure, which was first built, like I told you in the beginning, the 2-story house that was built by Charles Hall, and they actually preserved it. And then in like 1965, it was put in like the National Historic Landmarks. Well, the original Hull House is now used as the Hull House Museum, which operated, I think, by the University of Illinois at Chicago or whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
they're running it, and you can go and check it out. I think it's still there. I know at some point they were talking about closing some things down, but I wasn't quite sure. But as far as now, we'll just skip into the hauntings now. That kind of gives you a little bit of the background, what occurred there, what type of people were coming and going through there, what people passed away in there. But this place, I guess, is kind of really active, because it's been said, like I said, right when Charles's wife passed away in the home, I think Helen and the children at some point had even had some type of experiences from what I was reading. But the reports that I was seeing, or I was digging for and found, was they talk about seeing this woman who's in white, which it seems to always be the pattern. If you're
Every haunted place has a woman in white running around it.
Yeah, I guess if you die, you have to wear white. You can't wear color. So those of you guys who like pink or black or whatever, sorry, you gotta wear white.
Now forget it. When you come back, you're going to be dressed in white.
Yep. Laura Ingalls style, the nightgown
Yeah.
stuff. But the reports are talking about they're constantly seeing this woman. And this was right away when the tenants were moving in the 1830s or 60s or whatever the heck I just said. And why they were placing the water to trap the spirit up there. But they were always seeing her on the second floor, and they would see her like move the curtains and open the shutters, and then they just watch her like walk back and forth and things like that. And then people talked about shadow people, having experiences with these shadow people where they're spotted within the building, which I don't know why. I don't really want to call it like shadow people, but they're shadowy things, shaped as people. But who really knows what these shadow entities are? Were they ever human,
Really?
or not human, or whatever? But there is a report that I did see where they claim that there was a photograph taken of these shadow monks on the stairs at this place. I couldn't find it. Maybe if you guys Google the Hull House, you might be able to find this photograph of like, I think they said something like between 5 or 6 shadow monks all standing on the stairs. I'm like, what the heck were all these monks doing on the stairs? Were they just chanting? It's like, what a weird place for a bunch of monks to hang out. But
I know.
they talk about constantly hearing whispers, or of course you have your classic smell of cigar smoke. But to me, I don't think the smell of smoke really makes me believe that it's paranormal activity, because any place where anybody's ever smoked, the smoke gets trapped into the wood or into the rock or whatever, and with the right type of temperatures and different, from hot to cold, whatever, it releases that smell again, depending on. And cigars are really potent. I mean, they're pungent, So if I smell cigar smoke, I don't think like, oh, this place is haunted, But you got, perfume smells. You go investigate whether there are flowers nearby. Did somebody just spray some body axe, whatever, but as far as, cold spots and hearing, just standing in a place, and people talked about hearing somebody whispering right in their ear, I thought that was super interesting. But the fact that this place has so much history, where they were helping the immigrants who came over here and feeding them and clothing them and getting them help.
Well, a lot of people went through that place.
Right, and they were getting them aid with medicine and doctors, and then at one point the elderly stayed here and passed away in here. So I could see why a lot of people are saying that there is residual, and also I think active, intelligent spirits that are still there. And maybe because they felt good when they were being helped there, that they went back there. Maybe they just never wanted to leave. I don't know. Or the whole water thing, though, about trapping the spirit upstairs.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if that, do you believe in that?
What?
Do you believe in that, the fact that these immigrants were coming over and they were afraid of the spirits, so they would put pitchers of water all over?
Oh yeah,
No, I meant, do you believe
of,
that actually works? That's what I'm asking.
Do I believe it works?
I don't think it does.
Don't know, but apparently they believed it.
Right. I mean, I've always heard that spirits
and a lot of those immigrants,
rivers or
and a lot of those immigrants were superstitious.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, anything's possible. I think. I don't particularly know if that works or not, but apparently it sounds like it did.
Well, you always hear stories like from the past where people are like, spirits can't cross bodies of water because water traps them or whatever. So I found it kind of interesting.
Like they can't cross over water. I don't know. And to be honest with you, I don't even know if that's true or not.
So if that's the case, that's pretty sad for everybody who dies in like a shipwreck. They're just doomed. They're stuck in this body of water wherever their ship went down. Or their
I don't know, but I've seen pictures of the Titanic, and I had seen apparitions in some of the pictures. But I think that's because, they went down with it, was killed there, whatever, and they're still around the ship. I don't know. I think it's the Arizona that is sunk down there by Hawaii. People who visit that claim to see faces looking at them through the portholes. Because some of the portholes are visible. So
yeah, I think that was one of our show requests from people to do something like that. But there are people who say that there's scuba divers who are under the water, even like in the Great Lakes and stuff, and they're going by these shipwrecks and stuff, and they claim that they see apparitions, or they're hearing, or they hear things. And wasn't it like Destination Truth? They did something and they went down and they caught all this EVPs where these engines were running underwater, sounds of engines running, and they were hearing, and they got like conversational things. I can't,
but I can't remember what ship they went down to. But
was it like in Pearl Harbor or something? I can't remember which one it was.
I'm really not sure, but that goes to show you a place doesn't have to be on dry land to be haunted.
Well, no, but that would suck if they were stuck there, though. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure would be.
Why don't you hit up your next one, or do you think we should take like a quick 3-minute break?
Well, we'll take one after the next one because it's a short one.
Okay.
Okay, SHUMWAY, Illinois. Also in southern Illinois. It's the Ramsey Cemetery, and it's located 6 miles east of the intersection of I-57 and I-70. Now, this cemetery was first established as a private cemetery in 1851 for the Ramsey family, but 5 years later, it became a community cemetery. It's located at the gateway to Little Egypt, which is actually the nickname given to southern Illinois. Why? I don't know. The nickname Egypt came about in the 1830s when poor harvest in the north of the state drove people to southern Illinois to buy grain. And others say it's because the land of the great Mississippi and Ohio River valleys were like that of Egypt's Nile Delta. Now, the thing that makes this cemetery different is, there are several caves and rock shelters actually in the cemetery. And they're made of sandstone, and they are thousands of years old. Now, these caves are said to be haunted. In the 1920s, a small chapel was built next to the cemetery for funerals and the benefit of mourners. And it was used until the 1960s, when in the 1960s, a young man drove to the chapel and shot himself in the head. And his spirit is said to haunt the chapel, but the chapel has been closed. You can't go into it because of vandalism, and there is also a report that it's really fallen into bad decay and is to be torn down, and this may have already taken place. Getting back to the caves, though, no one is real sure what the caves were originally used for. Maybe they weren't used for nothing. Who knows?
Were they natural, or were they...
They're natural-made caves.
Oh, okay. Well, there could have been water under there at one point, and then the water just went somewhere
I
else.
know, but they haven't found any artifacts to show that people actually lived in them.
Mm-hmm.
But one fact is that beginning in the late 1800s and up until a few years ago, they were used for satanic rituals. And some of the caves are a little bit deep, and after so many feet, they've been closed off because of accidents, and some that have caused deaths. One thing, though, that you should know, if you decide to explore this place, there are reports of a werewolf slash dog man that wanders the area, and it's believed to live in one of the caves, but no one knows which one.
Wait,
And
they have dogmen running around this one?
Yeah.
That would...
They have a dog man running around this particular cemetery and the area. And the thing of it is, this thing has been seen and reported for decades. This is not something that's just new. This thing has been there for years and 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 so on.
How many years? No, just kidding. No, but I believe that there's more. I think that when these dogman sightings that people are having, I believe there's more than one, because I think they're just like a pack, just like wolves, you know what I mean? Because when we've checked out that channel, Dogman Encounters, where everybody's calling in and sharing their encounters with these things throughout the whole world, and when we started doing research on these dogman things, I found it very surprising how far they go back in history. And they're talking about with the Native Americans when they were first traversing across the Americas, you know. It's quite scary, the things that people are encountering, you know.
I know. And I was surprised, actually, to see that there was a dogman report, a dogman sighting. No, in Illinois.
Oh.
But then again, you know, people, when they think of Illinois, they think it's all flat and everything. Well, it's not. We have our hills, we have our gorges and all kinds of stuff.
Our hollers and...
Our hollers.
Yep.
But, and like I said, this thing it's been seen in this area.
Well, I'm sure probably not
for decades.
I'm sure not just the cemetery. I'm sure it probably wanders the whole
Well, it's not just the cemetery, but it has been seen a lot in the cemetery.
Yeah. That would creep me out, man.
Yeah.
Bring dog treats if you're going to the cemetery. Or steak.
There you go.
Yeah.
There are also reports of a man in a cloak with glowing red eyes. Now, nobody really knows for sure what this man is. Some do believe he might be a demon called up from the satanic rituals.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Who knows? You know, I mean, who knows? Who knows where this thing came from? And some of the other hauntings have been cold spots in some of the caves and the shelters, disembodied voices, touching, crying, the feeling of being watched. And also it is said that, you know, if you encounter the man in the cloak, then you get this real intense sense of fear and doom. They say this thing is just evil. And, but it has been said that I forgot what I was going to say. But anyway, the cemetery, you can go into the cemetery at night. I mean, it's not really restricted, but the police will show up to discourage partiers because they do patrol out that way. And there have been people, you know, out there partying and that have, you know, written and spray painted some of the walls in the caves, which I think they should be hung for. But that's just me. But like I said, you know, I mean, this place is accessible day and night. And these hauntings have been known to happen during the day. Matter of fact, a lot of them have been reported during the day.
Well, when you were doing your research and reading these things, and the dogman thing I find interesting because, you know, the Bigfoot and the dogman. They call it dogman. They don't want to term it werewolf because werewolf means a man's turning into a beast and back and forth. But they call these things dogmen because they're animals that are bipedal, ranging in size and shape, and they're very muscular. But I find it fascinating that because I never believed in this stuff until, started listening to hundreds of people sharing their encounters when it comes to dogmen and Bigfoot and stuff. So it kind of piqued my interest, and that's why we started researching all these things. And we actually we know some people who have had these things stalk them at their house for, months and months and months. So I was curious, did you read how recent these reports were? The most recent
they happened,
one, or?
I think the most recent one was like a year ago. And like I said, this thing has been seen for decades. This is not something that somebody just started reporting. This thing has been reported back 1800s, late 1800s.
Yeah, I've read, when we were researching, when we do these researches on different states and whatnot, there was some where I was reading where, because we want to, we're doing, haunted states. We're also going to do cryptid states too, where it's strictly, the show's going to be about the cryptids that people are supposedly seeing in Illinois or Wisconsin or, wherever. We're going to also do cryptid states, just like we're doing all 50 haunted states.
Well, and somewhere along the way, we're going to be doing Dogman shows.
Well, yeah, but
but
there was stuff when we were reading and researching about paranormal stuff where, of course you have all these ghost towns, where there was certain stuff where people were saying, oh, stay away from this town because that whole town is full of dog people, and people were growing up hearing about, stay away from this area. And it makes you wonder, where are these things coming from, and then you hear these things where people are like, well, they come from caves, or people talk about they're interdimensional, or they're aliens, or
well,
whatever.
this thing has
so
been seen.
I mean, that it's in this cemetery.
Yeah, this thing has been seen in the cemetery lots and lots of times. Even in the daytime, people have seen this thing, and of course, the surrounding area. It doesn't just stay in the cemetery. It wanders around the area. But and I absolutely do not believe in werewolves, but
not werewolves, but dogmen.
I believe that it's very, very possible that dogmen do exist.
Right.
I have never encountered one. Right. But I didn't believe in Bigfoot either until I encountered one.
Yeah, until one run across your truck.
Yeah.
Okay. That just happened, right? Yeah. I remember when you after it happened, you texted me up and you're like, OMG, you're not going to believe what the frick just happened, And it wasn't like once, it's just like twice you had some weird encounter. Why don't we take like a quick 3-minute break so I can get some water, and then we'll go into our second half of the show. We have a lot more to talk about, you guys, so stick with us, and we'll be right back in like 3 minutes. Welcome back to Anything But Ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Tonight's topic is Haunted Illinois. I am your host, Raven, and Spooky's back with us for our second half of the show, where we're just picking random spots in the state of Illinois that are said to have strange paranormal activity, as well as, I guess, weird creatures running around. Yeah. Pudgewudgies and leprechauns and who knows what else.
I would like to go to that cemetery and check it out. It's really not all that far from here, about an hour and a half. But I'd have to be on guard, the whole time I'm there. If they got a cryptid running around it.
I don't know. Okay, if you had to pick one or the other, which you can't even pick already because you already saw Bigfoot. But if I had to choose, someone's like, okay, you can either run across a dogman or a Bigfoot. I think I'd rather want to see a Bigfoot because to me, I think of those. What was that one horror movie where they had werewolves and vampires in it, where the werewolves that they created.
Underworld?
Yeah, that might have been it. Where a lot of people said that Underworld had almost close to what these dogmen kind of look like and how muscular they're built, and they have these German Shepherd type of heads and stuff. I think I'd rather want to run into a Bigfoot too, because to me, I think a wolf would just be too predatory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, really.
It's just not something I want to run into in a dark alley or in the middle of the woods. It's not my thing. But I guess I would pick Bigfoot for sure. If anything I've ever had experience, I'd want to see a Bigfoot. I'll just pack my beef jerky. It would be good to go.
You go beef jerky and Mountain Dew and you're safe.
Yeah.
Just throw it out to him as you're running.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and hit up the next one if you don't mind. Because I think you were kind of done with...
yeah, I was finished with it.
The cemetery one. Okay, everybody knows... I think most people know this one, but I figured I'd throw it in anyway. Is the Peoria... the cat's pounding on the door. Peoria State Hospital. It's been on many popular paranormal shows, and... I don't know, what was it, Ghost Hunters or not Ghost Hunter? Which one was that? The Taps, didn't they?
Ghost Adventures.
Yeah, and a couple.
Ghost Hunters, I think, have been there. There's been several paranormal groups in there. It's a pretty popular place to be investigating.
As far as investigating goes, and there's a reason why, because it's been known for a wide varieties of activity. But I'll just do a quick little history on this thing. But the asylum was first constructed during the late 1800s, and it was completed in 1887. But there was actually two structures that were built. The first structure they built was kind of like a castle type of structure, but it was never ever used for the hospital, and they tore it down in 1897 because they claimed that they didn't use the first building because it was built over some abandoned coal mines, and that it was actually causing stress cracks in the walls, and they thought that, one, the way that the place was built, they didn't really like how it looked, and two, they thought it was going to become really unsafe, and so they never even used it. So that was a big waste of money right there.
Yeah, really.
So they ended up constructing another building, and this is when Dr. Zeller came in and was the head of the asylum. And what he had them build everything in the cottage system, which happened a lot in all the different asylums, it seemed, spread out through Illinois and other places I was reading about. But it was completed in 1902, and they had 33 different buildings, and the doors were open, I guess, for business, if you want to say, in February of 1902. Now, they had their own store, their electrical house, laundry, bakery, kitchen, and the nurses had their own little space to stay and whatever. And a lot of the asylums had that. They were kind of their own little functioning society, their own suburb.
Exactly. They were, a lot of them were self-sufficient, I mean, they had farms with livestock, gardens and all kinds of things. And the patients are the ones that actually work these places.
Well, yeah. That it's kind of like you earn your keep type of thing, but because they're huge facilities, and they only had so much staff members to all these different patients. So that's why you have these, you always hear about these cases of abuse or neglect or whatever, because there was like so many patients to one nurse or one doctor. But, many of the patients who came in through this place, they ranged from those who had, emotional issues to handicap to the deaf or the mute, because back then, people would get rid of their children who had, like handicaps or issues or whatever. But it wasn't just like, oh, I'm super crazy, that's why I'm going into this asylum. But, husbands could toss their wives in there, like, I'm sick of you, I don't like your cooking, I'm putting you in an asylum. Or
I was just sitting here thinking about that, because back then a man could have his wife committed if for the smallest reason. If she would not, if she would not obey him, into the insane asylum.
I don't want to be married anymore, I'll just put my wife in the asylum. But they also had drunks who went in, or somebody who had like a little illness, or so it's not kind of like how it is today. So you had a wide range of people who would be going through the doors of these asylums. But Dr. Zeller, he, I guess from what I heard, he kept this place pretty good. He tried, it was probably one of the places that didn't have a lot of reported abuse cases as far as the other places were. So it wasn't like the worst asylum they had out there. It was actually, I guess, from what I was reading, they had one of the highest cure rates. I don't know how you cure somebody of insanities, but when I was reading about this, they talked about these doctors and people who were in there, they would perform several types of different therapies on these patients, which would range from electric shock therapy, which doesn't do crap, in my opinion. I don't think that ever helped people. I think it fries their brain. They had different types of water therapy. They even did lobotomies here, and from what I was reading, they only did lobotomies and all these other things to help, quote unquote, help these patients recover from their certain conditions. But
but back then, though, when they were doing these, it was almost barbaric. I mean, they weren't even perfected. Not to say that they're perfected now, but they were absolutely barbaric back then.
Yeah, now they have an off button for the electric shock therapy, but no, they reported about they would only do the lobotomies on the patients who were like the most dangerous, like really psychotic ones.
Because lobotomies would leave them like zombies. They would all of a sudden, these really violent patients were all of a sudden, just calm and obedient.
Well, they still do that. They take out I think it's a part in the front lobe where your emotional center is controlling, which it does not help. Anyway. Well, what I was saying is they would only do these lobotomies on the super dangerous or those who were like severely disabled, which I don't understand. Why would you do that to somebody who has a disability? I just think that they were curious about the human mind. They thought, let's poke around and see what, if we take this out or if we poke this part in the brain, if it might do something. But, it was like mini hospitals. People, were in here. They had different types of bizarre therapies because they were experimenting back then to try to find out what works best, what doesn't work best. But anyway, like a bunch of different asylums, people did get hurt or they died while in the care of these places.
Right.
Now, it's been said that there have been at least, I think, from what I was reading from different websites or whatever, I could be wrong. We're not experts, we're just, bantering. But I think it was like 16,000 or so who passed away while they were in this facility. Now, they were either killed by other violent patients, or, you have illnesses, you have suicides, or the occasion sometimes somebody might have been, sadly hurt or killed by staff members. It does happen. It does happen at places. But some of these patients' bodies, when they passed away here, some of them would have been sent home to their loved ones, while many of them were often just buried on the hospital grounds because there wasn't anybody to send them home to. They would come from poor houses or whatever. So some people would get, who ended up being buried on the hospital grounds. Some of them would have names or dates, but many of them would just have a marker number because they didn't know who they were. They were just, oh, this is the guy who's mute or can't talk. They would just give him a 111. That's this guy. Which it's sad, to put someone in the ground and not even have their name there. But most of the reports that have said that, like I said, this hospital was one of the high success rates at helping patients become cured. So many of them were sent home, and this was all over the country, not just in Illinois. But like I said, Dr. Zeller was actually a really good guy, and he did really do his best to care for the time period when he was there, unlike other asylums, you know what I mean? But you still have these issues that do occur because there's too many patients compared to staff members or anything else. But over the years, just like all the other places, the funding's cut or they don't have enough, so the state just cuts them off, closes the doors, and then sends the patients off. They disperse them to other places. And this hospital, from what I read, it closed its doors in 1973. And since its closure, most of the hospital's 63 buildings have been demolished or converted into like commercial businesses or industrial or whatever. And I think they're talking about demolishing the rest of it and selling off the limestone or whatever, but the rest of it's supposed to be demolished, I guess, which is sad. I hate when things that have history to it are really old, cool structures are always just wiped out and let's put in a Walmart parking lot or whatever, I hate that. But
really.
Now we have a little history on that, and I'm going to jump into the hauntings and reports and claims of this, okay? Now, they've talked about this place having, things occurring even when the hospital was open and patients were there. But one of the first known occurrences, which some of you guys already probably know this, but to those who listen now or listen later in the future of the podcast, they talked about when Dr. Zeller was there and his nurse and staff members and stuff. There was this one resident that worked there. He came in there, he's a patient, because he lost the ability to kind of speak, and he used to work for like this printing house, so they nicknamed him Old Book. And it was said that Old Book worked as one of the burial staff, because like you said before, a lot of the time the patients who weren't violent or could talk, walk, and do stuff, they'd actually help work at the farming area. They work in the kitchen, everything else. Well, this guy, he ended up working as one of the burial staff, and during every burial, this guy, he would take off his cap and he would just cry deep from his soul for every person that passed, that they buried. And he felt every emotion for the passing of this person. And it would, because he cried so much and just felt so much empathy for the person that was passing, other people who were there during the services would actually tear up, even some of the staff members and stuff. Well, this guy would often like lean up against this elm tree that was in the middle of the graveyard because his grief would get to him so much that he would have to support himself against the tree. So eventually, over the years, this man, like all of us will, passed on, and several of the residents and the staff attended his funeral because he was a really well-liked guy. And it was said, from what I was reading in several different sites, that it probably had up to hundreds, maybe 100 or so of people that attended just his funeral alone. And while they were lowering the casket into the ground, they heard this loud weeping and crying. And everybody claims, that they turned and they saw this man leaning up against the elm tree grieving. And Dr. Zeller was like, what the blank, And he told everybody to stop what they were doing, open up the coffin. And when they lifted the lid, they saw the body of the man in the coffin, and when they turned to look at the elm tree where he was standing, his body just vanished. So not only did patients see him that the Dr. Zeller, who is a very credited doctor who probably isn't going to go out there and spread stuff like that to, bring his name down. And nurses all experienced this man apparition crying for his own funeral on the tree, which I thought was kind of interesting. So that was like one of the first known paranormal type of things that was occurring at this place. Now, people also talk of while they were in this place or while they're visiting this place, they hear disembodied voices. You have your footsteps, always. You have objects moving from one room to another or whatever. They talked about hearing children screaming or talking or laughing, which that kind of creeps me out because like you're just like strolling through something and all of a sudden you hear these two little kids just laughing. That would creep me out,
Oh, yeah.
But they talk about, of course, you got the shadow people. They're always everywhere. You have the apparition of the lady in white. She's
Here we
everywhere.
go.
Yep.
She gets around, don't she?
Yeah. But there's actually people who have gone to this place where they have claims to have photos of these things occurring, of shadow people. They have this woman in white. And, of course they talk about people being touched or pushed. And there was somebody who even talked about one time when they were investigating this place that they actually got burned while in one of the buildings. Now, we talked about these paranormal shows where they went and, take it for what it is. TV's entertainment is what they had on their photographs and videos and their EVPs, real or not. We don't know. Was it faked? It's TV. It's up to you guys to decide. But, some of these shows like TAPS, they went in, they investigated, and they said, they heard female disembodied voices. They heard faint conversations when they were there. They saw things moving themselves. I think there's like a video from this place from TAPS too, where they claimed that they had a shadow moving through the cemetery, where a lot of people talk about the cemetery, where a lot of people go there and they say they experienced this man who's termed Old Book or nicknamed Old Book, where because you can go through the cemeteries, it's open, cemeteries are open during the day for anybody, and a lot of people talk about all the time when they're in the cemeteries that they're feeling cold spots or they're being touched or they see shadow figures darting about through the cemetery. But a lot of times they always talk about hearing crying, always crying, or somebody who's, really upset, which that man always did for every funeral. So is that residual or is that intelligent? I mean, as far as the crying part goes, who knows? But there are people who have online EVPs, photographs, and videos of said reported claims of their paranormal experiences while they were in this area. So I find that interesting, and the fact that, some of the first activities of spirits and stuff like that, going back to the beginning when Dr. Zeller was still alive and running the place, and a bunch of people witnessed it. I mean, that's a lot of people to witness something. I mean, that I find kind of cool.
A lot of places like this are full of spirits because
you have all the emotional trauma that takes
well,
place.
there were all the emotional trauma. A lot of people died in these places. Some, like you said before, were really bad, where the patients were tortured by the staff and by other patients, and a lot of these places just
even just being abandoned by your family and tossed in,
exactly,
and then left for your
I know, and a lot of them were,
defenses.
A lot of them were, mentally handicapped. And like we said before, a husband back then could have his wife committed for the dumbest little reason.
Or people would go in because they had alcoholism, and the next thing you know, you got your brain cut out, And I'm not saying this place did it, but there are places that did do that. But
right.
We're not saying every asylum was super horrible, because there were some patients who did enjoy their time there. They did like being able to have a job, like they worked the farming, or they worked in the kitchen, or they worked in the barber shop, and there's some patients who did love and enjoy this place, and maybe they stay there because it's something that they loved, it's their home, and they don't cross over, and they stay somewhere that they love. So I'm not saying like everything that occurs in these places is like negative. There are some patients who did enjoy their time. There was probably some staff who enjoyed working and helping patients too, but
yeah,
it's I don't know. These places always I find fascinating, And I think it's just
I do
because there's
too.
so much different emotions and range of things that are going on, and then this strange, therapies that they would come up with back in the day. It definitely has got to leave some type of imprint on something.
Oh, sure it does. Sure it does. It's just sad all the way around, really. And some of the procedures they did on them, electroshock therapy, water therapy. You know what water therapy was? They would put them in a tub full of ice water. I don't see how that's going to help. And then you had the lobotomies that took place, which I think is absolutely barbaric even today.
They still do things like this today.
Yeah, they sure do.
But now they drug you up first.
Yeah. Back then they didn't.
Do the Thorazine shuffle. But
yeah.
No, I mean,
back then they gave you something to bite on. That was it.
And
but at least now.
And me and you, we're just bantering, and we're not knocking anything. We're just openly bantering about different things and thoughts or whatever. We're not saying one way or the other, and we're not against mental help and people who have mental health or anything. I mean, there's a lot of things that occur on this planet, and there's a lot of things that do help, and there's a lot of things that don't help, But
right.
Back in the day, when these facilities were open, they weren't, and I think, wasn't it like, what was that, Geraldo Rivera? He went to one of these asylums where he reported where these patients were just left in their own feces and tied up to beds. So, I mean, it took a long time for these people to have justice for themselves because they weren't treated in some of these places very humanely. And that alone can leave a lot of negative energy or different emotions right there,
Really?
That could probably cause residual stuff. Maybe we should go into the next one before we get too stuck on, because we still have a few more to go.
Okay, Goreville, Illinois. It's Happy Hollow Trail and Road, and it's located in the Ferncliff State Park, which is 1 mile from Goreville. Take I-57 to the Goreville exit and follow the signs. Now, Goreville is just a speck on the map. I mean, this is a little bitty town. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bitty, small, quiet town just outside of Ferncliff State Park. Now, the trail is a 4.6 mile, almost 5 mile loop that is accessible year round, and it's mainly used for hiking, walking, and running. And you can even take your dog with you, but the dog must be kept on a leash.
When we were looking for photos that we could use or whatever, and then we did the Google map of it, that's a huge trail system in the middle of the woods and stuff. Who knows what's in there, dude?
Really? But, when you're going through this trail, you see waterfalls, small canyons, rocky trails, and ghosts. In the 1800s, a group of children became lost in these woods, and it was wintertime. And during the night, when the temperature really dropped, they died from the extreme cold. Well, the next day, their bodies were found, and one would think
How did a group of children get lost in the woods?
I have no idea. It didn't say.
Why were a group of children wandering in the woods together? I mean,
I have no idea. It didn't say.
Were they picking berries?
I have no idea.
I'm just going to make something up in my head while you're still going on.
Go ahead. But one would think that since it was so cold that the children would huddle together for warmth, but the bodies were found scattered around at least 10 feet from each other.
What?
I don't know. From what I read on this, I don't know if something killed these kids or if they just died from the extreme cold. Hikers and other people using the trail have reported hearing children laughing, and they've even seen and heard something running through the woods, kind of going from tree to tree, like it would run behind a tree and then turn around and peek out at them. And these are things that, they would catch out of the corner of their eye, and some of them would even get a glimpse of them, and said that they were just running around out there and then taking a peek. There's also been said that there have been accounts of possession. Now, if you visit the trail between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., you will not see or hear any of the local wildlife. They say it's just eerily quiet during that time. One story and I could not confirm this story, and I looked and looked for this, But it said that in 1980, a group of teenagers went to the trail and tried to communicate with the spirits, and each one became possessed for 9 days. Now, for that
What?
nine,
Okay. I'm starting to think of like that movie, like Blair Witch and things like that. This is a very
yeah,
strange paranormal stuff. Sorry.
it is. It said that for these 9 days, none of them would eat, they sleep or talk, but once in a while they would suddenly let out this blood curdling shriek and then suddenly start giggling to themselves. Now, like I said, I could not confirm this story and I looked for it,
Mm-hmm.
but
Sorry.
I don't know what happened.
Well, right, but you're
There,
just sharing what you found of what
yeah,
reports are
I'm
out
just
there.
sharing what I found, and it even said in the when I came across this story that it was hearsay. One person did.
People can get attachments or can have small bouts of possession. I mean, we do see that happen in
Yeah.
multiple different areas. So maybe it's not 9 people, but maybe it was like 2 kids who went in the woods and tried it out and something weird happened. Who knows?
Well, who knows what happened? I mean, these children's spirits could have entered them. Who knows? Um. Anyway, there are also reports of apparitions of Civil War soldiers walking through the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people have even reported that when they saw these Civil War soldiers walking, and that suddenly they would just stop and look at them. And some people believe them to be deserters who were trying to get home but became lost in the woods. Because I couldn't find any evidence of any battles being fought in southern Illinois in this area. There's been reports of footsteps coming from all directions. This one guy reported, actually, it was a man and woman. They were standing on the trail, and all of a sudden, they heard these footsteps coming through the woods. And they said that it was around fall when leaves were on the ground. And they said that they were just coming from all directions, like they were being surrounded, and they would hear the footsteps coming closer, but they never saw anything. There's been reports of being touched, the air becoming cold, even when the laughing starts, and even on hot summer days,
Mm-hmm.
that they would be on the trail and they would hear, in the middle of summer, they would start hearing these children laughing, and then all of a sudden it just became really, really cold in the area they were standing. The activity has been known to happen at all hours, and in fact, most of the reports have happened during the day.
When I was listening to a lot of things you were talking about, there's a multitude of different things that kind of popped in my head. One, we're in the out in nature, okay?
Yeah.
And one of the topics we have coming up has to do with nature spirits that is requested, and we're going to be doing stuff like that. But it made me think of, because, us growing up and we heard things through our family and everything else, you hear stories or whatever. But the woods, they talk about elementals and nature spirits and tricksters that lure people in and stuff. So some of these things that you're talking about, maybe that has to do with the land or the things that are within these woods. Like some of these kids going into the woods, maybe something was calling them into it. Because there's been, what show did you you remember when we were doing triangles?
Haunted. Yeah.
We were doing we did like Alaska's triangle, and then we did another triangle show, and they talked about these things that would lure people. They would be like little lights and like will-o-wisps or whatever you want to call them. They would lure people into the woods and then get them all turned about and lost. So maybe these kids had something come over them, if that really happened, or these teenagers, maybe had something to do with nature spirit. And then when you were talking about the Civil War soldiers, and you're like, I didn't find anything about no wars or anything happening in this area or whatever, but they could have been traversing home and died from illnesses, or they could have died in battle somewhere else, and their spirits making its trek back to, like you said, up north to where their home was. And maybe this is what people are seeing. Who knows? That's something I was like, oh, maybe it's something like that.
And we don't know if there's been anything in this place, like Oh, I don't know, like some sort of cult activities or rituals or anything like that being done.
You don't know,
So
or you didn't read anything about that?
I didn't read anything about it.
Did you
The
read
the
anything about like Native American, any burial grounds, or because I know a lot of people talk about like that, but what did you read
Well,
anything
that's a
about any?
possibility, but we didn't have a whole lot. Most of the Native Americans, don't get me wrong, there were some in southern Illinois, but most of them were up north,
Hmm.
either up north or further down south. And like I said, the one story that I couldn't confirm was
Yeah.
the one that supposedly happened in 1980. And as far as the Civil War soldiers, as far as I know, and I pretty well know Civil War history, there hasn't
Yeah.
been any battles
Well,
there.
well,
And
right.
it would make sense though if like they were deserters and they were just going home because a
Well,
lot
maybe
of
they
them
weren't,
did that
but maybe they weren't
and they
deserters. Maybe
became
they were just
lost.
heading home after the
Or
war.
it could, well, I that's what I started to say.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's a possibility too, and they became lost in the woods. It's people would be surprised how many national forests are in southern Illinois.
I think, people are always going to like, let's go to this old building or let's go to this cemetery because they're, we'll have experiences. And you know me, I don't go paranormal investigating. I don't, I'm not an investigator. I'm not knocking those who do it. Cool for them. You know what I mean? It's just, I enjoy reading about it, whatever else, but I don't, I don't mind going to check out a place or whatever, but I don't like go into trying to make contact or whatever. But we have land and it's up in the wilderness, and it's really far from a lot of people and stuff. You know where I'm talking about. And I was using like one of those knockoff GoPros just so I could like wear it on my head, and I was like filming when I was walking out in the woods just to show you what it's like there and everything else. And every single time there's always EVPs or there's something captured on those videos that's paranormal that I've shown you for years. And it's like I don't even know what's happening because you don't really hear it. I'm not talking or trying to make contact. I might in the video trying to explain to you guys like what I'm looking at or where this area is in our land and like the history or whatever. And then you come back and we play it and there's like tons of EVPs and things. And I just think people don't realize like how active nature is with
Right.
that alone. And are these tricksters? Are these real people or spirits? Of people who once lived. I don't know why this is happening or where it occurs, but it happens a lot in the wilderness. I was actually shocked. And they're actually interacting with, because when we were doing it, remember when I'd say something, it would actually answer to what I was saying for
Right.
to you guys when I show you later on, like here, explain stuff. They actually were interacting with what I was actually saying at that time, and it just blows my mind that that was occurring. And I was never looking for this stuff, so to me, it seems like people don't have to go to this old historical place to make contact. I think that you could almost make contact anywhere with something at this point. It seems like.
I get a lot of stuff from cemeteries and woods and stuff like that too. And so it's like you say, you don't have to be in a building to get um, evidence, or even to witness activity.
Yes, sorry. I was reading the live chat because when we do these shows, we have live chat and a lot of times we do interact with the chat. But somebody had mentioned like maybe the 9 teenagers were on a bad acid trip, and that's why they seemed like they were possessed. I wouldn't.
Who knows?
Why would you
Who
even?
knows? Back in the
I don't even think it would be safe
1960s,
to
people
take
were
drugs.
dropping acid like it was candy.
Well, yeah, but the government also used acid to help people with, tap into their superhuman powers like telepathy. That's a whole nother show stuff we're talking about. But I do find it fascinating. I would want to do a little more research, but when we couldn't use a lot of photos, but you can go Google this place, and it's actually really cool because there's a lot of people who do hike this area and they do post their shows. But we
Yeah, and
try
it just
not to
goes in
take
a loop.
copyrighted stuff.
It's almost 5 miles long, and you go past waterfalls and
It's
other really, really pretty places.
yeah, it's super
And
cool.
yeah, and the activity could happen anywhere on the trail.
Anywhere in the
It
whole state park area. Is it a state park or was it
probably,
again?
but this
Yeah, it's a state park.
I
Sorry,
lost my
it's a
thought.
state park.
But there's been a lot of activity all through this trail. I mean, there's not one place where there's more activity than another because they, some of the hikers and whatever, the fitness people, they have reported things in different areas of this trail. And it's just a 5 mile loop. I mean, really, it's not that big of a trail.
Yeah, but if you can look here how wooded it is, just
Yeah.
from the little map thing. Do you know if they even talked about any like bizarre, not even just like some of these spirits, but I wonder if they talked about if people. I guess we should have Googled it before we did the show. If people talked about having any weird cryptid experiences,
No, they didn't. I did look for
like
that.
Bigfoots and stuff, because I
Yeah,
know
I did look for
there's a
I
lot of
did look for
Bigfoot
that.
activity in Illinois for whatever
Oh,
reason.
in southern Illinois, we get quite a bit of it. There was just another sighting in southern Illinois. I think it was a month, 3 weeks to a month ago. So, I mean, there are Bigfoot sightings down there, but I never found anything about a cryptid sighting of any kind on this trail. It's mostly paranormal activity.
Hmm.
And while the children running from tree to tree are like glimpses of them, they said these Civil War soldiers, you see them. Sometimes you will see them and they may not have any feet, or sometimes you'll see the entire, apparition from head to their
Oh,
feet.
yeah.
So these are and from what I understand, this apparition, I think there's like they said there was like 3 or 4 Civil War soldiers, and a lot of people have seen them.
Yeah, we've done a couple different states where some facilities were used as Civil War hospital, makeshift hospitals and
Yeah,
stuff, and people
and
would
it's like
report seeing, like you said, that type of apparitions,
yeah,
or
and there were
just their
like
arms, an apparition's arm, because they would always lose their limbs. That people would see just body parts of an apparition, not a full
well, and
body.
somebody in chat mentioned too that a lot of the Confederate soldiers that were captured, they were sent to prisons here in Southern Illinois.
Oh, so they could have been escaping the prisons
They could have been escaping the prison and trying to find their way home. Who knows?
and could have got
You
yeah.
know,
That's yeah.
one of the more famous Confederate prisons was in Alton. It's not there anymore. There's just a small wall of it left. But there were all kinds of Confederate soldiers. There were quite a few of them that were held in Southern Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Illinois has a lot of interesting history. A lot of states do.
Yeah, it does.
I'm gonna hop into the next one so we don't run out because you still have another one too.
Now, we may go a few minutes over.
Yeah, we didn't know how we were gonna do. We're like, maybe we might be short tonight. Maybe who
We
knows? Because it's
we
we've been
figured we
off air
probably
for
only had like
4
an hour and
months.
a half worth.
Yeah, we thought, are we gonna be able to talk for 2 hours? We haven't done this for so long, but we went right back into the groove. One of us swearing, one of us messing up on words, joking about. So we're back to normal, I guess. But this one I have is the old slave house on Hickory Hill, and it's located on Crenshaw Lane in Equality Township, Illinois. Now, this one, when I was reading about it, it was interesting and made me sick to my stomach at the same time because of what occurred, and also what, it just reminds us of certain dark points that happen in human history. You know what I mean? In human history, not saying this country, that country, whatever, just in general. There's just dark points that happen within societies and stuff, but
and a lot of people too don't realize that even though Illinois there had been no battles here or anything, but some people in Illinois actually did have slaves.
right. But anyway, people might not. But as far as the old slave house on Hickory Hill, okay, this place was the land was purchased by this guy. His name was John Hart Crenshaw, and his wife Francine Taylor Crenshaw. I believe that was her whole name. Anyway, they purchased this land, and they built upon the Hickory Hill around the mid 1830s. Now, this place was like a 3-story mansion. It had 2 verandas, I guess that's how you call them. And they were supported by these large columns. And the first 2 lower levels were said to have about 6 or 7 rooms each. And they had like several fireplaces on each floor. And there was and the 3rd floor too. And then the attic, they had an attic. And they said in the attic there was said to have had, I think, 12 small rooms about the size of like a cell or like a horse stall type of thing, you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And then between all these little cells or stalls up in the attic room, there was like this one straight long hallway which had 2 posts in there. I'm thinking the 2 posts were probably support beams for the roof, not just stuck in there.
That's a good guess.
I'm assuming.
This is probably what they were. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, so John and his wife moved into this mansion. They had 5 children, and John worked in the salt mines for many years, when he was growing up, and that's how he got his savings and his money. And it was somewhere during like the 1830s is when the government started to sell off the salt mines to use the money to kind of establish and improve parts of Illinois, and build prisons and what have you. So, John having some money, he ended up leasing several of the salt mines over the years, and it allowed him at one point to actually lease slaves for their owners to work in the salt mines. Because like you said, even though Illinois was considered a free state, it was actually legal at that time to allow owners to lease their slaves out in Illinois to work for these companies or businesses that were in need of labor. And many of them were actually, I call it forced, into working into these used salt mines. Well, John was doing well money-wise, so he ended up purchasing like thousands of acres, and, he had a sawmill and other such things. And it was during this time, him and some other people started having like this conversation where they decide, they had this conversation and they decided and they executed it, where instead of like leasing the slaves, they were going to actually kidnap free slaves and sell them and or use them for labor. And this happened a lot.
That happened a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, whatever, the twisted mind of human beings at times. But it was said that John was actually a part of the reverse underground railroad, where there was like, they had like this large network where they had several homes that were used by those who kidnapped the free slaves and would force them and transport these people back to the slave states and sell them, from, they'd take them back from the free states, bring them back to like the southern states and sell them for like a higher price or whatever price they wanted. And these people were called like the night riders. They were like these individuals that were largely responsible for this human trafficking, basically, is what it is. And
right.
John,
and it happened more than people realized it did.
Oh, yeah. That's super, like, so much history that's not even, you're not even told half the real history in school, So you kind of have to just do your own digging and research. But John was said to have employed several of these night riders as a side business. You know what I mean? Now, many of these night riders would physically and psychologically torment and sexually abuse these people that they would capture. And they would, like I was talking, remember how I talked about the attic with the 12 little cells or stall-type shapes? Well, John, he would house these slaves upstairs in these little rooms, little, I guess, boxes, if that's what you want to call them. They had like these small barred windows on it. They'd had flat wooden bunks for them to lay on. And like I said, with the long passages from one end of the house to the other. Now, on each side of the house, straight through the attic, you can see up there they have these big windows. I don't know if you're looking at the photo or not, but our viewers can, and those later on listening to the podcast. That would be the little window where they would get fresh air during these hot, blistering summer days, and the 2 posts that I was talking about that probably supported the roof, they ended up putting the slaves on there, and they'd often whip them for punishments and whatever. So there was a lot of turmoil and emotions going through this attic space, you know, and they actually had like this carriageway that was built into the mansion that led back and forth, you know, to the Saline River and to his mansion, where these free men and women and their children, I mean, they didn't discriminate, I guess they just took to everybody, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
It's disgusting to me, but they would take these people and they would transport them from the river to the mansion and then force them upstairs into these cells where they were chained and or kept prisoners. And there were stories or things that I was reading from somewhere around 300 or more babies that were, what do you want to say? How to say this? The babies were basically bred there and sold for money from one sire slave alone. That was one slave alone that I read had over 300 or some babies, you know.
Wow.
And just imagine how many others that were occurring there. You were basically forcing these women to get pregnant and then taking their babies. I don't know.
Bunnies.
I know, sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me.
What were they bred with?
No, I don't know. My work, I worked all day, you know, 10 hours, and then we're doing a show tonight. But anyway, they would take these babies from these women and then sell them because babies and women who were pregnant were worth way more money, you know, than other slaves. But they would suffer from beatings and rapes and illness and these poor conditions over the years at the Crenshaw Mansion. And at one point, there was a point when John was accused and arrested of kidnapping of a free family who he said owed him services in the 1840s. He's like, well, I did it because they owed me back work or whatever the heck excuse these people use to keep people imprisoned. But because of his money and his good standings in the community and politically, of course, they said, well, you're not guilty. And, you know, that caused a little uproar, you know, for those who supported the freedom of everybody. So they ended up burning some of his businesses down to the ground because they did not like the outcome of him not being found guilty, you know, because they were against slavery, you know. And
right. I think they burnt down his sawmill.
Yeah, they did. But see, even though Illinois was like this free state, from what I was reading, John had like 700 slaves that worked for him on his thousands and thousands of like acres, you know. And
well, I think he owned somewhere over 300,000 acres at one point.
I don't know. Somebody was asking like, how did she survive that one many births? I think the one sire. I don't know. I'm just reading like what they have out there. There's three, maybe it was like around 300.
It was probably with more than one female. It was probably
multiple. Like the one guy was getting multiple.
I hate to use the word, but bred. Yeah. To more than one.
The one female. Stud, I guess, you know, because you have the horses and stuff like that. You have like the one stud that they breed with all these other horses. And I hate to say this, and I'm not trying to like put down any persons. But I'm trying to best explain it with an analogy, and it's a horrible analogy, and I'm sorry to even compare it that way. But, you know, that's basically what they did, you know. They would keep one guy, and they liked how his stature or physicality or whatever it was about him, and used him to, you know, have all these women have babies or stuff like that. Anyway, because somebody was talking about it in chat.
Well, and that was probably, you know, like it had to have been more than one woman, and there were a lot of slaves that passed through this place. So
yeah, but they would use one guy or one woman multiple times over and over because they liked the whatever about them, you know what I mean? And it's just horrible things that happened, and it did happen in the history, you know, and like I said, it's just some sick dark times that happened here. But anyway, yeah, he did have about 300,000 acres or whatever. But there was a time where he got, like, super infuriated with some of his female slaves. So he would actually beat them severely, which caused some of the men to rise up against him. Which high, I could see why that's happening. And it
Yeah.
was said one of the male slaves actually hacked off John's leg. And then as time went by after that incident, it was said that his business began to decline and he sold off most of his slaves, and then he moved to town and hired like this German family to like caretake and oversee the farm operations. And then I think it was like in 1860, that's when John sold his place, and he passed away in like 1871. Now it was during the 1900s, I think like 1907. I mean, I could be wrong on the year because it varies on all the different sites and stuff when we're doing our research, so we try to do our best here. But it was the Sisk's family that purchased and owned this place for about, I think, 80 years, and they lived and operated it for a while as a museum. Because at first people would hear the history and the story about this, so they'd stop by and be like, hey, can we give you some money and you give us a little tour of the upstairs attic or whatever. So they're like, okay, well, then they kind of turned it into a little bit of like a museum, and they kind of like allowed the public to have some tours and stuff all the way up to I think like the 1990s, and then that's when they closed it down to the public, and eventually they sold the house and the 10 acres to the state of Illinois in 2000 for about $500,000 or whatever the heck it was anyway. But the reason why they sold it is because I think Illinois was going to end up like using it as a historical place or whatever, because
Yeah.
that.
Well, did you know that when John owned the mansion, it said that Lincoln had stayed there during one of his debates, and John Crenshaw hosted a ball in honor of those debates, and Lincoln spent the night during the 1840s. That's just a little fascinating tidbit of some of the useless information I'm full of.
Yeah, that you like to toss in from time to time. I do that too.
Time to time.
I never know, like when we talk sometimes, like seriously, we'll be like bantering about like whatever, and then you're like, did you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, but I do now. You're like a little encyclopedia sometimes.
I know, I'm just so full of useless information because I watch a lot of documentaries and read a lot.
But technically, it's not really useless because at some point it always comes up. And see, tonight it came up.
Yeah.
And yes, I did know because I read about it. But if I didn't read about this and you were just like, hey, be like, oh, okay. You should be like one of those people that goes on those game shows. What's that one game show with Alex Trebek?
Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Jeopardy.
You'll be like one of the first ones on there, and they'll be like paranormal.
I sit and watch that show.
1,000. Alex.
I'll sit and watch that show, and when somebody gives the wrong answer, I sit there, oh, you idiot, that's not right.
Yeah, I'll see you on there, and you'll be doing
I can't watch those.
I know. Okay, back to the show. The hauntings, the claims and reports of the hauntings that occur here at the old slavery house. Okay, now people say that they're seeing and hearing things over the years at this house, which I can understand why. I mean, look at everything that took place. That's horrific things. But, of course people passed away there, I'm sure, from illnesses and being killed, if they're not complying to these men and,
right.
Which I wouldn't comply.
There had to have been a lot of deaths there.
For sure. And babies dying, from forced pregnancies over and over again. Anyway, people would talk about not just people who lived there and stayed there, but people who are visiting, at one, for the museum and whatever else. They all talk about hearing disembodied whispers, and they would hear screams and moans. They would hear footsteps, or you have that feeling like you're being watched or followed, but there's nobody around you. Of course, the attic is one of the most active places, which is understandable because of everything that took place there. But just because of all the mistreatment and things. But I mean, I could see why this place totally has, I think probably a lot of residual activity, just because of all the emotions and everything else that occurred there, and possibly intelligent, just because of, what Crenshaw did. But, the slave trade was and is a dark part of our human history, and with all this dark and evil stuff that happened there's no wonder why this place is extremely active. And these people, there's a few people who said, hey, can I spend the night? Because they thought they had big balls, and they're like, yeah, we can stay here and we'll not chase out or nothing. But they didn't even last the full night because they would see lights, or they were like physically pushed, or they would hear somebody's tormented soul, screaming in pain, or crying. And it's just too much that these people who thought they were like hardcore men, we can stand up to anything, they can even stand there for a couple hours and they build, but the place is closed down because the state owns it. They are trying to get funds to this. There's like people on their own who want this place to stay there because it is plays a big role in human history, even though it was a dark role, but it plays an important role because things like this shouldn't be forgot, so that things like this don't repeat itself. But this John Crenshaw, he had this what was his? He was like the great-great-grandfather of this serial killer. His name was Joe something. I forgot. Ball. I think his last name, Joe Ball or whatever. Anyway, he was like this serial killer that was killing people in the 1930s in Texas. So it makes you wonder if this evil runs in his family's bloodline. This John Crenshaw is like this crazy dude. And now his great-great-grandson became like this, he was like this huge serial killer in the 1930s in Texas. And I thought that was really weird that some of his family members were still continually doing this evil things.
Well, I believe that evil runs in families. I really do. It's, if you have like an evil father, one of his sons or even one of his daughters, is is likely to grow up to be just as evil, if not more.
Yeah.
Because like this Joe Ball, it's a given fact that John Crenshaw was an evil man. He was an evil, greedy man. Okay? It doesn't surprise me that he has another relative that was just as evil as him.
I know. When I was doing all this research and then I found that, I was like, whoa. And then I'm like, well, that guy could make for just another whole show on himself, but there are people who were, snuck in or had permission at some point to do some paranormal investigation and stuff, and they claimed that they had gotten recordings or photographs of strange activities. But I can definitely, this is just one of those places that I felt needed to be talked about because I had so much things that occurred there that I believe that this place is haunted. I really do believe that there is either residual or intelligent activity at this place.
Absolutely.
But the state owns it right now. There's no museum to go to or anything else, but you can go and Google the old slave house and read about what they're trying to do and stuff, and they want to get it open, but the roads need to be fixed up. They need to fix up the house a little bit before it's safe for the public, or how the government likes to have everything a certain way or whatever. So, why don't you go ahead and hit your next one, because we're already at 10 o'clock.
Okay, yeah, we're going to run over at least another 15 minutes. Cave in Rock, Illinois. And I'm talking about Cave in Rock State Park. It's in southeast Hardin County by the Ohio River, across the river from Crittenden County, Kentucky. And yes, there really is a town in southern Illinois named Cave in Rock. Cave in Rock. And it has quite a history. The town itself has a population of about 330 people. Now, you wouldn't think that a town that small would have anything to offer. Well, this one does. Its main feature and most popular tourist attraction is the Cave in Rock Cave along the Ohio River, which is just up the river from the town. Now, this is a 55, I can't talk. This is a 55-foot wide cave that was formed by wind and water erosion, and later it became even deeper in 1811 by the earthquakes along the New Madrid Fault, and there were 12 earthquakes in all that took place on December 16th, 1811. Now, while they were small quakes, meaning they did not last long in duration, some of them were estimated to be as high as 8.2 on the, I guess they didn't have the Richter scale back then. And for those of you who do not know, the New Madrid Fault is a seismic zone that runs through the Midwest, and it affects Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Kentucky. Now, the cave was first discovered in 1739 by a French explorer, and from the 1790s to the 1870s, it was occupied by robbers, counterfeiters, bootleggers, horse thieves, river pirates, and any other kind of outlaw you can imagine. And at one time, one of my ancestors, John A. Merle, held up there.
I'm just kind of laughing because I know you were going to talk about your ancestor, and your ancestor was kind of shady, but you were just talking about earlier about how we were talking about the bloodline and how evil and stuff goes down the bloodline.
Well, that's on that.
So are you trying to say, should we be aware of Spooky and her dark side?
That runs on my paternal grandmother's side.
Oh, okay.
And she was evil. Anyway. At one time, the place was referred to as Merle's Cave because of all the business he did there. Now, this place has an extensive history, and I could do at least a half hour to an hour show on it, but I'm going to try my best to paraphrase this as best I can.
Well, we already did a show on John A. Merle, remember?
Well,
and we did talk a little bit about the cave.
We're not going to go too much in. We're not going to go into John Merle, really.
Yeah.
He just happened to be one of the people there that used the place.
Evil.
But
yeah,
but history always helps to explain the hauntings. Now, and I am going to be skipping some years of the history. So in 1797, a Samuel Mason, who at one time was an officer in the militia and fought in the Revolutionary War, and then later he turned robber and leader of the Mason gang. He moved his operation to the cave, and he established a tavern and a brothel there. And he would lure in gullible river travelers, and then he'd rob them and kill them. And at this time, though, he was going by the name of James Bully Wilson. And of course, as things go, someone shows up, sees you have a good business, and wants it for themselves. So in June of 1799, Wilson/Mason was assassinated. And some believe that it was by the Hart brothers who had moved into the area. Now, the Hart brothers are known to be America's first serial killers. These guys killed more for bloodlust than financial gain. And they once pushed a young couple off the cliff over the cave, but both of them survived. And their next victim to be pushed off of that cliff was a man they tied to a horse, and they just shoved them both off, and both of them died.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about that when we did on that one show. There was some really nasty stuff they did to people. There
were some really nasty people that hung out here
at that cave. Yeah, hookers and killers.
Yeah, in 1822 to 1823, you had the Sturdivant gang, who were so vicious and ruthless, they were hunted down by vigilantes and killed at the cave. Now, through the years, there were so many travelers along the river, they lured them in and they robbed and killed them, like I said before. And most of the times they just made it out of their boats and had not even gotten up to the cave. They were killed right there on their boats, and their bodies left in their boat and just shoved on down the river. In the 1850s, a man named Potts ran an inn there, and travelers would check in, but they wouldn't check out. In the 1860s, a man named Eason Bigsby took up residence, and he attacked his wife Anna and tried to make her tell him where her first husband, who happened to be a robber, had buried his money, because over the years, it was common knowledge that the robbers and such would bury their ill-gotten gains and then later would come back and dig it up when things calmed down. Well, she refused to tell Bigsby where the money was, and it was probably because she didn't know where it was, and she had to get away from him, so she ran away in the dark and she ran off the cliff. Well, she did survive the fall, but died a few years later of illness. And actually, her spirit is one that is seen in the cave. Today, the cave is part of Cave and Rock State Park. Now, you can hike or boat to it, and you can explore the cave as well as the area around it. And many tourists who have visited this cave have reported it to be freezing cold inside the cave. And some have even said that it got so cold in there they could see their breath.
Yeah, but that kind of makes sense. Caves they're underground, and that's where people store food and everything. It's
right.
Natural cold freezer. So
yeah, well, some of the hauntings are besides the coldness. There have been reports of gunfire, disembodied voices. There's been sounds of people having a party in there. The sense of doom and fear, yelling, touching, and blood-curdling screams that come from inside the cave. Now, the scream has been said to be so loud that it echoed coming through that cave. And all of these events have been reported during the day and sometimes early evening. Visitors are required to be out of the cave area after dusk, and I can understand why, because the cave is right there on the river. And I'm sure it's to avoid accidents and even drowning by people stumbling around in the dark or someone going up there drunk at night to check out the cave. And it is also probably to discourage treasure hunters who go out there trying to find any treasure that the outlaws may have left behind. Because it's been said that a lot of people come out there with, what do they call them? Metal detectors.
Yeah, you bought me one of those. Thank you, by the way. Use that on our property we have up north. But,
that's because I'm such a nice person. I'm a sweetheart once you get to know me.
Anyway, about this cave. I remember when we did a show on your relative and stuff, and just the nastiness and everything that took place there. I can totally understand why there's strange paranormal happenings occurring there, just because of all the people that were killed.
I paraphrased the history on this. This place has an extensive history. I was really, really surprised about it. And we did mention the cave when we did that show on John Merle.
Yeah.
We did mention it, but this place is just, like I said, this isn't even half the history of the sort of people that were in this place that hung out here. I mean, it was like a social gathering for all the shady, evil, whatever outlaws.
Whatever. I don't even know. Yeah. There's so many words we could say that we shouldn't say. I mean, I already accidentally swore at the beginning of the show, so we'll try not to swear the rest of the show. But yeah, I mean, there was just so many strange things that occurred here. But I was just wondering, do you know if they ever mapped out the cave system here? If a lot of people, did people go in? Because you know how, what was that one cave that we did in Kentucky?
I'm not sure. Mammoth Caves?
Yeah, because you know how they explored that, they mapped it out, so then people know the networking system of the cave. You know, they have splunkers and everything else. So I was curious if anybody really went too deep into this and there's a known map
I don't
of the
know
system.
I don't know how far this cave goes back. It goes back far enough they had a brothel in there. It goes back far enough that they would, have music in there, and people would be dancing while they were in there drinking and carousing with the brothel ladies.
Yes, somebody in our live we're interacting with our chat here, so those who listen to the podcast later know that we're interacting with people live on our show. Somebody asked where this was, and it's Cave in Rock State Park.
It's Cave in Rock State Park, just outside of Cave in Rock, Illinois.
Wait, I thought it was in
quite
Hardin
a name
County.
For a town. I understand that. And if you go through there, don't blink or you'll miss the town.
I find, have had multiple shows where we have talked about cave systems, and it's creepy. Some of the things, like Mammoth Cave, now that you remember the name, from Kentucky, some of the things, like they had tours in there, where they're showing.
That's an extensive cave system, and it's one of the largest cave systems in the country. And they do tours through there, but they have where the visitors go, they have it all roped off, kind of, like follow the rope, you'll get out. You go on the other side of the rope, you're lost. We're not going to look for you. But This particular cave, I don't know how far in it
That
goes.
reminds me, I want to do more missing cases in national state parks and everything because we've done like a few, but I still want to keep
There's
doing
been people
more.
missing in those caves. There were people, people went missing in the Mammoth caves,
Yeah.
and some of them they haven't found.
Well, when we
That's how extensive that system is.
right when we did the Mammoth Cave, these people who were on tour were actually seeing apparitions or were having
Yeah,
things, they were being touched, or there were old items still in there from booze bottles and everything else that were being whipped about.
right.
So I don't know. It's just some of these places. I wish we could like talk forever and ever and ever because there's like a billion places we could talk about in Illinois. Because you have that. Who is that? Cemetery Mary or whatever the heck her name was. Remember how?
Resurrection Mary,
Yeah, whatever. Sorry, I'm not like this huge up to date
Bachelor
on.
Grove Cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, there's or you had like
The lot where H&H Holmes's house used to sit. The house is gone now, but the lot
yeah,
is haunted.
yeah, or you have Chicago where they had all the gangs killing everybody. And what was that
Yeah,
Valentine's Day massacre or whatever the heck it was?
right.
Like, there's
I mean, there's
so many things that we could cover, but we tried to just stick to 2 hours. Obviously, we went
and that's
over
like,
a little
okay,
bit.
Galena, Illinois, the entire town is haunted. What is that town over by Missouri, over by Hannibal, Missouri? I can't think of the name of the town. I want to say Quincy, but I don't think that's it. That entire town is haunted. It really was amazing to me exactly how many places were haunted. And I thought, well, I'm not going to go through the whole state. I'm just going to do Southern Illinois because I live down here. And it was hard to even try to pick out which ones that I wanted to report, to talk about tonight
Well, right.
because there were so many of them.
There's tons of them, and we're gonna end up like we said, we've been doing haunted states for a few years now. Because it's taking us so long because we're doing tons of other shows, and most of them ones we're doing are always viewers' requests. But I want to
Yeah,
start doing haunted, or I want to start doing cryptid states because while we're sitting here researching all the paranormal activities, I'm also reading about people having these weird encounters with humanoids or Bigfoots or Dogmans or what have you. So I want us to start doing that too. But um, we just want to I don't know, we've really started to get back into doing shows again. I know we've been gone for
yeah,
a while. We apologize, but we had things that we needed to take care of. Life stuff happens. Me and Spooky, we
yeah.
do this for fun on our own. We're not getting paid. This is just, something that we started doing and wanting to meet people who have like-minded thoughts and opinions like we do, or might bring stuff to us that we never even thought of before. And we really enjoy doing this stuff, and we really enjoy meeting and talking with you guys on the internet. And like we said, we
Yes,
probably
we
won't
do.
get into doing shows like every single week right away. We'll probably do every other week. And but we're coming back, and we appreciate all you guys still,
Yeah, because
sticking
like
with
now
us
we've got
and sending us messages while we were
right.
away and wishing us well for health and everything else. And we really do appreciate, you guys and getting to know you and
Oh,
you spending your
absolutely.
time with us. But why don't you go ahead and say what you wanted to say,
Yeah, I
Spooky?
want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for all the wishes, the get well wishes and stuff that were sent to me. I want to thank our mods who always do a great job, and everybody who came in to listen to us. Join us. We don't know if it's going to be next week or the week after at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We're going to discuss a viewer's request, fairies and gnomes.
Yeah. Oh, I guess
Thank,
nature spirits really what it
yeah.
is.
And like I said, thank you for coming. Please subscribe to us, give us a like, and please share us with others on any social media site you may be a part of.
Right. Thank you guys all for coming. Um, if you want to get show reminders, you can either click on the little bell here on YouTube next to our Spooky Raven name, or you can go to our website, anythingbutordinary2.wix.com/anythingbutordinary, and you can sign up for weekly email reminders for our live shows on YouTube. Or if you like, you can contact us there with any show ideas or, friendly banter or whatever. We hope you guys have a great and safe week. We have prayers out for all those who have been affected by the fires and the floods. We hope you guys can get the help.
And the hurricanes.
Well, yeah, that hurricanes is causing the flooding. But everybody's forgetting about all the fires that are happening all over the place.
Yeah,
and stuff.
those too.
But you guys be safe, and hopefully we'll see you guys again soon. And thanks for hanging out with us and giving our show a like. And we'll see you next show. Good night.